9:15 here on the morning show with Jeff and Will, AM 1700 WRCR Haverstraw, WRCR.com. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Joining us now is the publisher of RCBizJournal.com, Tina Trasser. Good morning, Tina.
Oh, good morning, Rockland County. How is everybody on this gorgeous day?
I'm feeling good. How are you?
I am good. Lots to talk about today, including the Sears buildings that are for sale in Nanuet, updates on the cannabis front. But, of course, we have to take a moment to pause and talk about Clarkstown's term limits. We listened to Supervisor Homan on the radio earlier, and I guess he was unaware that a decision had come down on Friday afternoon, late afternoon, and that once again the judge reaffirms her decision to uphold the term limits in the town of Clarkstown. Just to quote from her order, just in case anybody hasn't looked at it and hasn't seen it, she said that the 3-2 vote to try to repeal the term limit law was, her words, illegal, invalid, null, and void. Okay, so she has now twice ruled that the term limits law in Clarkstown stands, and that's where it is. So the elected officials who are termed out, which includes Supervisor Homan, will not be able to vote. I mean, they may try, and they will be challenged legally. But this judge has been very clear in her ruling, and I really don't think that you can get around the language of illegal, invalid, null, and void. So I know that there's been some misinformation out there this morning. I find that unfortunate, but I hope that we have clarified the record on this and that people will understand where things actually do stand.
Let me throw out one question, though, if I might. And
Go ahead.
It does sound this way, but George keeps insisting that she hasn't ruled on the merits of the law itself, not speaking to the vote that was taken in January, which this did, but he's saying that she hasn't ruled on whether term limits was the law itself. He is insisting it was flawed to begin with.
Okay,
where does that stand?
It stands nowhere.
Okay.
It's irrelevant. He may he keeps talking about that because I guess he thinks it switches the perception around, but the judge has also affirmed her earlier ruling that the town can only repeal. This is the key thing, okay? And I don't want to get into the weeds because I don't want to lose people, and I have other things I want to talk about. But the judge also affirmed her earlier ruling that the town can only repeal the term limits by a supermajority, okay? And that would require 4 council votes. The repeal, when they voted to try to take this off the books, they used a 3-2 vote. They were not allowed to do that, and so she has said that vote is null and void and illegal and invalid. Now, he can challenge her at the appeals level. He has due process. He has a route, but he can't keep challenging it, on the radio and say things that just aren't true. And I think it just does a disservice to the county. So, moving on.
All right.
Unless you have any other questions.
I do not.
Okay. I think that very interestingly, we learned last week and we reported last week that the 2 Sears buildings at the Nanuet site on Route 59, part of the shops at Nanuet, that whole property, the 2 buildings are now have been listed for sale with Royal Properties. Now, Royal Properties is the same company that has leased half of the Macy's building, with At Home on the ground floor, and the top part of the Macy's building remains empty for now, I think, in excess of 5 years. The Sears buildings are interesting because one is kind of clustered with the other Simon buildings and now has some kind of low-end furniture store taking some space in there. And then the automotive center has been completely empty for a long time. They're both 2 prime pieces of property. I don't know how useful the buildings themselves are. I can't imagine that, for example, the auto center, unless it had some similar commercial industrial type use, would necessarily be that convertible without it being torn down. But what we do know is this. We know that there's been nothing in front of the Technical Advisory Committee, that's TAC, in Clarkstown. So there's nothing pending to the point where a developer is at the table saying to Clarkstown, as far as we know, that this is the vision for these properties or this property. At least it's not that far along. We don't know what the price that they're asking is. We don't know the asking price for this property because sometimes with commercial real estate the prices are not necessarily listed. But what we do know is that the former Sears department store was sold, the department store was sold to a company called SPS Portfolio Holdings in 2015 for $13 million. So it's unclear what these properties are going to go for. Now, we also know that this site is not zoned for residential use, but it is situated very close to of course, the train and the whole, what's called the transit-oriented development. You know, the whole area behind the shops at Nanuet was rezoned, I think it was last year or the year before. No, maybe I'm losing track of time. Recently, it was rezoned, but still no development has sprung up in and around that site yet either. So there's a lot of questions about what is likely to happen. In the meantime, the property is still owned by Simon Group, which owns the shops at Nanuet. And if we look at national trends, what we know is that when shopping developer centers, or REITs, as they are sometimes known and owned by, these kind of properties have typically been repurposed, not for retail, because the appetite for retail has shrunk, but rather for housing, warehouses, places of worship, open space, and other kind of mixed-use developments that do not rely. Certainly, there are no department stores that are coming back in to take the Sears building, and even retail, we know, is in decline because of online shopping and the smaller footprint that big boxes are looking for. So those two buildings in Nanuet, based on national trends, and not only national trends, but based on what we are seeing for the former Sears buildings all around the country, we are likely to see something other, certainly, than what we had seen there before. We touched on this in our story to talk about some of the projects that are going on around the country in former Sears buildings. And, for example, they include in California, there's a residential development in a former Sears building. In Chicago, that's going to become an e-commerce distribution hub. There's one on the west side of Chicago that is going to become a university medical center for outpatient care. That's very feasible because those are springing up. And in Baltimore, another residential center. So. We know that this is the same thing with the owners of the Palisades Center in West Nyack, where the pressure there is to redevelop, and it's generally not been in the direction of just retail alone. So the market is shifting, the demands are shifting, and this will be definitely an important site to watch as we continue to see how Nanuet gets redeveloped, and hopefully it does, rather than to continue to stay fallow and empty and underutilized, because this is important. So we'll put a pin in that. Any questions on that before I mention cannabis?
Nope. We're eagerly awaiting you to talk about cannabis.
Let's get high.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. So this is first of all, I want to mention that we have started up a new newsletter called Marijuana Mondays, and just like our regular newsletter, this is something you could just go online and sign up for. We send it out every Monday at noon on Monday, and we have been keeping Rockland County and the surrounding counties up to date on what is going on in the cannabis world. It is a dynamic topic. It is an interesting new area of entrepreneurial opportunity. Now, the important thing that happened this week is that the Second Circuit Court of Appeals cleared the path for the New York State Office of Cannabis Management to issue retail cannabis dispensary licenses in the Hudson Valley and Brooklyn and Central and Western New York. This is a big deal. This is a big green light that had been thwarted because there had been a lawsuit from somebody outside of New York who had challenged the notion that somebody from outside of New York couldn't be eligible for a license. So this was winding through the courts, and we had been reporting on this, and so this was a big day, this was a big decision. Now, what's supposed to happen today, almost as we speak through the day, is that there's going to be an announcement of at least 5 licenses that are going to be handed out. Now, you may remember back a while ago when there was the option to opt in or opt out, and essentially all of the towns in Rockland County opted out. But a handful of the villages, including the village of Haverstraw, Nyack, Piermont, Chestnut Ridge, and Airmont, all opted in to allow retail dispensaries in their municipal borders.
Did the town of Haverstraw also opt in, or they did not?
No, they did not.
They didn't, okay.
Right. So there is, from what I understand, there is one candidate from Rockland County that's in the mix right now. So I don't know which of these 5, one handful of villages, I believe it's a woman. I don't know whether she's going to get that license, and there will be more licenses issued. But this is happening. This is happening in New York. This is going to be an entrepreneurial opportunity. And I suppose as we start to see these retail dispensaries open, I guess it is the villages who opted in that will benefit first, and I guess might pave the way for acceptability on this topic or not. This remains to be seen. But there's movement on this front, and I think it's interesting, and I think we wrote a story quite a while ago about the Berkshires, about Great Barrington in Massachusetts, having been early and often on this topic, and having created this sense that it's kind of like a destination for these cannabis dispensaries. And it's very much part of the fabric of this street, and it's the main street, and it's very much a part of, tourism. And we know how much Rockland County likes to promote tourism and use, things that are tourism attractive. And this is just something. It's like cideries and breweries and wineries. This is, one of the next phases of a destination or a target for people who come to places. And so, whatever village seizes on this first, or wherever this spreads, they're going to have the leg up on this.
It certainly should be interesting to see when that announcement comes down. Thank you, Tina, so much for joining us as always. We will talk to you again next Monday. Tina Traster of the Rockland County Business Journal, rcbizjournal.com. Thank you so much.
Have a great week.